She sold her mother's inheritance for a party. The buyer was her mother. Now let me explain exactly what that means, because it is exactly as wild as it sounds. There was a woman who had a mother who worked her whole life, a mother who sacrificed everything, her comfort, her savings, her time, her health, so that her daughter could have a better life than she did. And this mother had one treasure, one single precious thing left by her own mother before she died, a vintage gold watch, old, beautiful, the kind of object that carries the weight of a whole family's history inside it. She gave that watch to her daughter. Not sold it, gave it, as a gift, as a symbol, as the physical expression of everything she had always believed about her daughter, that she was worth the most precious thing her family owned. Now, here is where the story turns. The daughter wanted to throw a party. Not a small party, a big one, the kind you post about online. The kind where the photos look expensive and the guests look like they belong somewhere important, and the comments say things like goals and living her best life and I want to be her. The kind of party that cost serious money she did not have. So she sold the watch. She listed it online secretly without telling her mother, and she lied. She told her mother the watch was lost. And then she threw the party. And on the night of the party, while she was standing in the middle of all those people and all those lights and all those photos, a black car pulled up outside. A lawyer stepped out. He had a package. He said the anonymous buyer, who had paid triple the asking price for the watch, was here to collect it in person. The crowd parted. The buyer stepped into the light. And the daughter's world stopped completely. Because the buyer was her mother. Now, before you think you know what happens next, let me stop you. Because this story is not just about a party and a watch and a daughter who made a terrible choice. This story is about what that mother's life actually looked like, about what she sacrificed and how she sacrificed it and what it built and what it cost her. It is about a watch that was much more than a watch. It is about a daughter who had to learn the hardest lesson of her adult life in front of every single person she was trying to impress. And it is about what a mother does when she has been hurt in the deepest possible way, and what she chooses to do with that hurt. Stay right here. This story is going to stay with you. Like this video right now if you believe a mother's love is the most expensive thing in the world and the least appreciated. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub and hit that bell. Every week, a new story. Don't miss a single one. Comment below, has someone ever done something to you that you could only understand the full cost of later? Tell us. Her name was Martha Ediz Okonkwo. She was born in 1955 in Nsukka, Anambra State, the first daughter of a schoolteacher father named Pa Emmanuel Okonkwo and a market trader mother named Mama Ngozi, who sold fabric at the Nsukka morning market 6 days a week and attended church on the 7th with the specific gratitude of someone who understood that survival required both commerce and prayer, and that both needed to be maintained consistently. The Okonkwo household was modest, not the grinding poverty of nothing. Pa Emmanuel's teacher's salary kept the roof and the school fees and a reliable meal pattern, but not comfortable in any way that allowed for excess. Every kobo was a decision. Every expenditure was weighed against the other things it could have been. The children, Martha and her 3 younger brothers, grew up understanding this arithmetic without being explicitly taught it. Martha was the kind of child who paid attention. She paid attention to everything, to how the market women negotiated price, to how her father prepared his lessons on Sunday evenings for the next week's teaching, to how her mother selected fabric at the wholesalers, feeling the weight of it, checking the color for fadable dyes, testing the selvage. She absorbed the practical education of a household that could not afford to make avoidable mistakes. She was particularly attentive to the watch. The watch belonged to her grandmother. Mama Ediz, her mother's mother, was a small, fierce woman from Ennui who had been married at 16, widowed at 32, and had subsequently raised 5 children alone on the proceeds of a textile business she ran from the front room of her house. She was the kind of woman about whom stories accumulated naturally. People told you things about her before you could ask, the way people talk about someone who made a genuine impression on everyone they met. The watch had been a gift to Mama Adiz from her husband on the occasion of their 10th wedding anniversary, which was 1948, which made the watch both old and, for its time, extraordinarily expensive. He had saved for it for 2 years without telling her. He had given it to her on a Sunday morning before church, and she had looked at it and had looked at him and had said nothing for a long moment. And then she had said, "You saved for 2 years." "Yes," he had said. "Without telling me." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you would have told me to buy something practical," he had said. She had never told the story without laughing at this point, because he was completely right. She would have told him to buy something practical. She was a practical woman in almost every dimension of her life. But she kept the watch for 34 years. She wore it to church every Sunday. She wore it to the funerals and the weddings and the celebrations that punctuated a long life. She wore it when her husband died, and she wore it to the graduations of each of her 5 children, and she wore it when Martha's mother married Pa Emanuel. She wore it for 34 years with the specific consistency of someone for whom an object has become a practice. When Martha was 18 years old, Mama Adiz died. She left the watch to her eldest granddaughter. Not in a will, there was no formal will. She gave it to Martha directly, 3 weeks before she died, when she was still clear in her mind and knew exactly what she was doing. She took it off her wrist, and she held Martha's hand and she put the watch in it. "You are a serious girl," Mama Adiz said. "I have watched you. You pay attention. You do not waste what you are given." Martha held the watch. "This watched your grandfather save for 2 years," Mama Adiz said. "It watched me bury him. It watched your mother be born and your uncles and your aunt. It has been in every important room this family has been in since 1948. She closed Martha's fingers around it. "Take care of it," she said, "not because it is expensive, because of what it remembers." Martha wore the watch from that day. Not every day she was practical in the same way her grandmother had been practical, and she understood that a delicate vintage piece needed to be protected from daily wear. But for the important days, the significant days, the days that were worth marking, she wore it on her wedding day. His name was Victor Okonkwo, same surname by coincidence, which had been the source of mild amusement at the wedding and some administrative confusion at the registry office. Victor was from Enugu, a quiet man who had studied electrical engineering and who worked for a construction company that was building the new commercial district in Lagos. He was not the kind of man who filled rooms. He was the kind who made them more solid by his presence in them. They married in 1980. Martha was 25. Victor was 28. The wedding was in Nsukka, at the family church, with fabric from Mama Ngozi's market stall used for the decorations because that was what they could afford, and because Martha had decided that if she was going to have a celebration, it would be made from things that meant something. They moved to Lagos. Victor's engineering work had taken him there, and Lagos in the early 1980s was a city in the middle of something, in the middle of growth, in the middle of commerce, in the middle of a decade that would prove complicated but would also produce, for people who were paying attention and willing to work consistently, serious opportunity. Martha was paying attention. She started small. She had been helping her mother at the fabric stall since she was 8 years old. She knew fabric, the weight of it, the quality markers, the difference between what something looked like and what it actually was. She knew how to buy and what to pay and how to sell and what price the market would bear. She knew how to talk to customers in the specific way that made them feel that their money was being spent well. She started selling fabric from the front of their small rented house in Surulere. Not a shop, a table. A wooden table outside the gate with a parasol above it, and a selection of Ankara and George wrappers that she sourced from Balagun Market and sold at a margin she had calculated precisely enough to know exactly what each piece needed to make and how many pieces she needed to sell each week to cover the household's needs and begin, very slowly, to save. Victor came home from work one evening in their first month in Lagos and looked at the table and looked at his wife behind it and said, "When did you set this up?" "This morning," she said. "Did you sell anything?" he said. "4 pieces," she said. "One more and I'm ahead of what I calculated." He looked at her. "What did you calculate?" he said. She showed him. She had a small notebook in her apron pocket with the numbers in it: cost price, selling price, weekly target, monthly projection. He read the notebook. "You made this today," he said. "Last night," she said, "while you were sleeping." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you need anything from me?" he said. "A better table eventually," she said. "This one has a wobble on the left side." He fixed the table that weekend. The fabric business grew slowly and then faster. Martha was good at it in all the ways that mattered: the sourcing, the customer relationship, the management of what she had and what she needed. She had a memory for what each regular customer had bought and what they might want next. She had an instinct for what was going to sell and what was going to sit, and she managed her inventory with the specific discipline of someone for whom buying the wrong thing was not an acceptable option, because wrong purchases were not money lost. They were money that should have been somewhere else. By 1985, the table had become a proper stall. By 1988, the stall was a small shop, a rented space in a commercial building not far from their house, which Victor had by then bought, with a loan that Martha had calculated the repayments on and had projected the household income against before she told Victor to take it. The shop did reasonably well. Lagos had grown, and the market for good fabric had grown with it. Martha had built a customer base that was specifically loyal, not the passing trade of price shoppers, but the returning trade of women who knew that Martha Okonkwo's shop had what they wanted and who trusted her assessment of quality because she had never been wrong about it. And then Sarah arrived. Sarah Victoria Okonkwo was born in 1987. She was their only child. They had tried for more and the more had not come, which was a grief they carried quietly and which made Sarah, by default, the full weight of every parental hope they had. This was not healthy exactly. To place the entirety of your parental investment in one child is to create a specific kind of pressure, even when the investment is love. But it was what it was, and they loved her with the specific intensity of people who had only one vessel for a very large amount of feeling. Sarah grew up in the shop. This sounds like it should have produced what it produced for Martha, a girl who learned the business by watching it, who absorbed the arithmetic of it, who understood the specific work behind the comfortable life they were managing to build. It produced something else. Sarah saw the shop, and she saw the fabric, and she saw the counting at the end of the day, but what registered for her was different from what had registered for her mother in Nsukka. What registered was the gap. The difference between the life they had and the lives she saw around her in Lagos, which was a city where the full spectrum of wealth was always visible, and where the distance between one end of the spectrum and the other was traversed, every day, by people who were openly performing the good end for whoever was watching. She saw the women who came to buy from her mother, the wealthy ones, the Lagos society women with their drivers outside and their phones that were more expensive than anything in the house, and their way of occupying space as if the space had been arranged for them. She saw how her mother smiled and welcomed and showed the fabric and carefully wrapped the purchase. And she saw the difference between the woman doing the selling and the woman doing the buying, and she decided, young and clearly and without fully understanding what she was deciding, that she was going to be on the buying side. Not because she was lazy, Sarah was not lazy. She was actually quite intelligent and capable in several ways. But because the buying side was what looked like a rival, and the selling side looked like waiting to arrive. Victor died in 1994. Sarah was 7, old enough to understand that her father was gone and young enough for the understanding to be partial and the grief to take years to fully process. The death was sudden, a complication from a routine surgery, the kind of thing that the doctor described as extremely unlikely, and that happened anyway with the specific indifference of unlikely things. Martha was 39. She was running the shop alone, which she had been doing for years in practice while Victor was alive, but which now she was doing in a different sense. Without the safety net of his income, without the sense of his presence in the house when she came home, without the specific quality of the household that two people made together. She did not fall apart. She had Sarah. Sarah was 7 and needed feeding and schooling and the specific daily reality of a mother who was present and functioning. Martha was present and functioning because Sarah needed her to be, which was the specific cruelty and gift of parenthood. It does not allow you to stop. She also had the watch. She wore it on the morning after Victor's burial. She stood in the bedroom at 5:30 and she looked at herself in the mirror, and she put the watch on her wrist and she looked at it there. She thought about Mama Adiz. She thought, you buried your husband and you went to the market and you ran the textile business and you raised 5 children. She thought, I can do this. She went to the shop. The shop, over the following years, became more than a shop. Martha had been observing the fabric industry in Lagos with the specific attention she applied to everything, and she had noticed something. The middle layer, between the wholesale importers and the individual retail customers, was badly organized. Retailers were buying in small quantities at poor prices. Importers were dealing with hundreds of small accounts when they wanted to deal with fewer, larger ones. There was an opportunity. If you could aggregate on the retail side, if you could represent multiple small retailers as a single purchasing voice, to negotiate better import prices and distribute the benefit across the retailer network. She proposed this to 6 other fabric shop owners she knew from the market. 4 agreed. She became, informally at first and then properly as a registered trade association later, the purchasing representative for a collective of 15 Lagos fabric retailers. She negotiated with importers. She organized shared logistics. She managed the distribution of goods across the network. The collective saved each member money. Martha took a coordination fee. The coordination fee, across 15 members, was larger than the shop's individual profit had been. By 2000, the collective had 32 members. By 2005, it had 81 members and had formalized as Akonkwo Textile Trade Association, which was registered with the Lagos State Business Registry, and which Martha ran as executive director with a small staff of 4. She was still running the original shop. The shop was now almost incidental to the main business. It functioned primarily as a showroom and testing ground for new products. But she kept it because it was where everything had started and because something in her, the part that had stood behind the table in Surulere in 1980 and calculated the margin on each wrapper, needed the shop to remain. She also invested. She had been careful with money her entire life. The association income had, over 15 years, allowed her to save seriously, not the thin savings of someone scraping small amounts from insufficient income, but the real savings of someone with a growing income and disciplined spending. She had put it in property, one apartment in 2003, another in 2007, a small commercial unit in 2010. By 2015, Martha Adiz Akonkwo was 60 years old. She was not a billionaire. She was not a household name. She was a wealthy woman in the specific way of someone whose wealth had accumulated through decades of attention and discipline, and never wasting what she had been given. She lived in a house in the Magodo estate in Lagos, comfortable, well-maintained, filled with the specific things of a woman who had chosen everything in it carefully. She wore the watch on Sundays and on important days. She had Sarah, who was 28 years old, who had a degree in communications from a Lagos private university, who worked in the marketing department of a mid-sized company in Victoria Island, who had, in the 2 years since she started earning a proper salary, developed a relationship with social media that her mother observed with the specific concern of someone who recognized a pattern without being able to name it precisely. Sarah's Instagram was her life, not a record of her life, her life. She took photographs for it and she made choices for it, and she evaluated experiences based on their photographability. The page showed a Lagos socialite, events, designer items, restaurant tables, the specific curated richness of someone who wanted to be perceived as having arrived at the destination that Sarah had been orienting toward since she was a child watching the wealthy women in her mother's shop. The reality behind the page was the marketing department's salary, a rented flat in Lekki that required financial stretching to maintain, credit card debt that was manageable but not comfortable, and the specific anxiety of someone who was perpetually performing a life that was slightly beyond what they actually had. Martha saw the page sometimes. Sarah showed her things. Martha said nothing about what she observed in it. She was not the kind of mother who communicated through nagging. She was the kind who watched and waited and trusted that reality would eventually provide its own instruction. She also trusted, perhaps too much, that the thing she had given Sarah, the watch, which she had handed over formally on Sarah's 25th birthday, with the same kind of ceremony that Mama Adiz had used when she gave it to Martha, had transferred not just the object, but the understanding of what the object meant. She was wrong about this. This is where everything turns. Stay right here. Sarah had accepted the watch on her 25th birthday with genuine feeling. She was not a bad person. This needed to be said early and clearly. Sarah Okonkwo was not calculating or cruel in the way of someone who had decided to harm people. She was someone who had made a series of decisions, each of which seemed small and manageable in the moment, that had accumulated into something with consequences she had not fully thought through. She had put the watch in the glass case in her bedroom, a display case she kept for her more important accessories. She looked at it sometimes. She understood it was old. She understood her mother and grandmother had worn it. She understood, in the abstract way of someone receiving information they have not yet needed to apply, that it was important. But she wore it only twice in the 3 years she had it, both times to events where she thought it would look interesting in photographs. The second time, a woman at the event had asked about it, and Sarah had said it was vintage, and the woman had been impressed, and the word vintage in the caption had gotten a specific kind of response. That response was the beginning of the problem, though Sarah didn't know it yet. The idea of the party had been forming for months. Not just any party, a 30th birthday party, because Sarah was turning 30 in October and she had decided that 30 was the turning point, the moment when she stopped performing the life she wanted and actually appeared to live it. Her page needed an event. An anchor event, something that would establish her in the Lagos social media world where she desperately wanted a footprint as someone real. She had been to enough of these parties to know what they required. A venue, not just a venue, a specific kind of venue that said something. A caterer, again specific, with a name that her target audience would recognize. A photographer and videographer whose work style matched the aesthetic she was building. A DJ with the right credits. Goodie bags, florals, the specific visual language of a Lagos party that was worth posting about. She had priced it all. The total was 3 times her monthly salary. She sat with this for 2 weeks. She considered loans. She already had credit card debt, and her credit history was not the kind that made additional borrowing straightforward. She considered asking her mother, and rejected this idea because her mother would ask questions that Sarah did not want to answer about the purpose of this specific expenditure. She considered scaling back, and rejected this because a scaled-back version would look exactly like what it was. And then one evening, she was on her laptop looking at something entirely unrelated when she found the auction platform. It was a high-end auction site, not the kind where people sold household goods, the kind that handled vintage jewelry, antiques, estate items. She had ended up there through a chain of clicking that she later could not fully reconstruct. She looked at the items on the platform, the prices they were fetching, the specific category for vintage watches, and there were watches on there that looked nothing special to her eye, but that were selling for amounts that solved her problem several times over. She thought about the glass case in her bedroom. She thought about the watch. She told herself several things over the following 3 days. She told herself it was an asset that was not being used. She told herself that her mother had given it to her, which meant it was hers to do with as she chose. She told herself that she could replace it eventually, buy something similar when she had more money. She told herself that the important thing was the memory, not the object, and memories could not be sold. She told herself all of these things with the specific application of someone who needed to reach a conclusion that was already decided and was constructing justification backward from it. She photographed the watch. She researched how to list it. She wrote a description: vintage ladies' gold watch, 1948, excellent condition, full provenance. And she set an asking price that was, based on comparable items she had found, realistic. She listed it. Then she called her mother. "Mama," she said, "I need to tell you something." "Tell me," Martha said. "The watch," Sarah said. She had prepared the words. Not dishonest words. She had decided that lying outright would be harder to maintain than an ambiguous truth. "I am worried about it. I don't feel I am taking care of it properly. I keep thinking it should be somewhere more secure." "It is in your glass case," Martha said. "That is secure." "But I take it out sometimes and I am afraid I will damage it," Sarah said. "It is so old. I am afraid every time I wear it." "Then don't wear it every day," Martha said. "Only for the important days." "Yes," Sarah said, "but if anything happened to it." "Don't let anything happen to it," Martha said. They talked for a few more minutes and then ended the call. 3 days later, Sarah called again. "Mama," she said, "the watch, I cannot find it." A silence. "What do you mean you cannot find it?" Martha said. "I had it," Sarah said. "I took it out to look at it on Sunday and I put it back. I thought I put it back, and now it is not in the case." Another silence. "Did you move it?" Martha said. "Did you put it somewhere different?" "I searched everywhere," Sarah said. "Everywhere in the flat. I don't understand." The silence was longer this time. "Are you sure?" Martha said. "Mama, I am so sorry," Sarah said. "I am so sorry. I have looked everywhere." Martha was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was something that Sarah, even through the phone, even in the middle of the lie she was telling, felt at a level below conscious thought. "All right," Martha said, simply nothing else. They ended the call. Martha sat in her sitting room in the Magodo house. She looked at the wall. She thought about 1948. She thought about her grandmother's wrist. She thought about 34 years of Sunday mornings. She thought about the morning after Victor's funeral. She thought about 25 years of a daughter growing up, and the specific kind of faith that goes into the act of giving someone the most precious thing you own. She sat with all of this for a very long time. Then she went to her computer. She typed the name of the auction platform that she had found because she was not a woman who dealt in assumptions when facts were available. She had found it 2 days before Sarah's second call. She had found it because she had spent 24 hours after the first call conducting a quiet, methodical investigation of the kind she applied to everything. She had looked at the watch, at the photograph of the watch she kept in her phone, a photo she had taken when she gave it to Sarah. She had searched the auction platform with specific terms: Vintage Ladies Gold Watch 1948 Nigeria Ennui. The listing had come up on the fourth search variation. She had looked at the listing for a very long time. She had looked at it before the second call. She had waited for the second call anyway. When the call came and Sarah said the watch was lost, Martha said all right and ended the call, and then she sat in her sitting room and she made a decision. Not the decision to reveal what she knew, not the decision to call Sarah back and confront her, not the decision to be angry, which she was, in the deep and specific way of someone who has been betrayed by the person they most trusted. The decision was different. She called the auction platform. She spoke to a representative. She asked about the Vintage Ladies Gold Watch 1948 currently listed. "It is still available," the representative said. "What is the current bid?" she said. She was told. She thought. "I would like to make an offer," she said. "Not through the auction process. A direct offer, triple the current asking price, paid immediately with one condition." "What condition?" the representative said. "The delivery," she said. "I want it delivered personally, by a representative, to the address where the party will be held, on the night of the party." A pause. "Ma'am, that is an unusual request," the representative said. "Yes," Martha said. "It is also a triple payment made immediately. Is that possible or not?" "Let me check with management," the representative said. She held. The answer was yes. She paid from her savings. Not money she could not afford to lose. Martha Adiz Okonkwo was a woman who had been building financial security for 40 years and who had multiple reserves. But it was significant. It was, she calculated when she reviewed her accounts afterward, approximately the same amount that Victor had saved over 2 years to buy the watch in the first place. This was not coincidental. Martha believed in symmetry. She also made one additional request to the platform representative, which she delivered carefully, and which the representative agreed to with the specific willingness of someone who was dealing with a client paying triple price. And then she began preparing. The party is almost here, and so is Martha. Sarah's 30th birthday party was scheduled for the second Saturday of October. She had booked the venue 2 months earlier, a rooftop event space in a Victoria Island building that had been featured on 3 Lagos lifestyle blogs and whose signature aesthetic was fairy lights, exposed brick, and the specific combination of rustic and polished that read well in photographs. The higher cost was significant. She had negotiated it slightly, leveraging the fact that she was booking during a week that the venue had had a cancellation. She had booked the caterer, a name her social media contacts would recognize, a woman who ran a catering operation known for its presentation as much as its food. Small plates, beautiful arrangements, the kind of food that photographed better than it tasted, but that tasted good enough that nobody was going to complain. She had booked the DJ Kesh, who was not famous in the way of people who appeared in national publications, but who was famous in the specific Lagos circuit of events that she wanted to be associated with, and whose name in her event announcement had generated the specific kind of response she was looking for. She had booked the photographer and the videographer separately, 2 different people, because she needed photographs that could be used immediately on the night and a video reel for the following week's content. She had designed the florals herself. Not literally, she had worked with a florist, but she had made every choice, referencing images she had been saving for 8 months for exactly this purpose. The color palette was blush and gold. The flowers were roses and baby's breath, and something the florist called hanging amaranths that trailed from the ceiling installations. She had sent the invitations digital, designed by a graphic designer friend, with a specific aesthetic that matched everything else she had planned. She had bought the dress 3 weeks before the event. This had been the one purchase that had felt most specifically difficult, not because of the cost, though the cost was substantial, but because she had tried on 12 dresses before finding the one that worked. What she needed was something that looked expensive and unusual without looking like it was trying to look expensive and unusual, which was a specific balance that required finding. She had found it in a boutique in Aikcha, a midnight blue silk dress with a back cut that was architectural and simple at once, that photographed with the specific quality of something that required a confident person to wear. She bought it without completely calculating what it would do to her remaining budget, because by that point the budget had already been compromised by the caterer and the venue, and she had stopped being able to look at the total number directly. The total number, if she had looked at it directly, would have told her the following. She had spent money she did not have. She had gone 3 months into the kind of debt that was going to take 6 months to clear if she cut every non-essential expense immediately. She had sold her grandmother's watch to fund a party that was, fundamentally, about making people who did not know her well believe she was something she was not. She did not look at the total number directly. She looked at the venue mock-up the event planner had sent her, and it was beautiful, and she told herself the rest of it would sort itself out. The guest list was 83 people. Not all close friends, the close friends were perhaps 20. The rest were the specific population of Lagos' social media adjacencies, people she had met at events, people whose pages she followed and who followed hers, people who were not quite in her inner circle but who were in the outer ring of the world she was trying to belong to. She wanted them there because their presence, their photographs from the event, their mentions on their pages, was part of the point. Her mother was on the guest list. She had invited Martha because not inviting her would have been a statement that she could not make, both because she loved her mother and because her mother not being at her 30th birthday would have been noticeable. She had invited her and had told her the venue and the time and had said, "Dress nicely, Mama. It is going to be a proper event." Martha had said, "I will dress nicely." She had not said anything else about it. Sarah had taken this as straightforward agreement. The evening of the party arrived. Sarah had been at the venue since 4 in the afternoon, overseeing the final setup. The florals were being installed. The tables were being arranged. The caterer's team was setting up the kitchen area. The lighting technician was adjusting the fairy lights along the east wall. She stood in the middle of it, and she felt something that she would later look back on as the specific feeling of something built on insufficient ground feeling temporarily solid. It looked beautiful. It did look beautiful. Whatever else was true about the choices that had been made to produce this evening, the physical result of those choices was genuinely beautiful. The space had been transformed in the way that good event design transforms a space. You entered it, and the lights and the flowers and the careful arrangement of everything made you feel that you had arrived somewhere special. Her friends began to arrive at 7. The first to come was her closest friend, Adiz, not to be confused with Martha's middle name, though the coincidence was one of those Lagos things. Adiz Ibe was 31, worked in finance, had known Sarah since university, and was the person in Sarah's life who was most allowed to say difficult things. She came in and looked around the space and said, "Sarah, this is a lot." "It's my 30th, Sarah said. "I know," Adiz said. "I mean it in the compliment sense and also the other sense." "Just the compliment sense tonight," Sarah said. Adiz looked at her. "Okay," she said, "you look amazing." "Thank you," Sarah said. More guests arrived. The DJ started at 8. The caterer's small plates were being circulated by the staff. Each plate a small artwork on a slate, photographed extensively by every person who received one. By 9, the party was in full swing. Sarah moved through it the way she had imagined moving through it in the dress, with her hair that the stylist had done in the afternoon, with the specific ease of someone who was in her element. People took photographs with her. The photographer was doing his work. The videographer was moving through the crowd. She posted 3 photographs between 9 and 10. Each one immediately generated the specific numbers, likes, comments, the ones that said "gorgeous" and "happy birthday queen," and "this is the life." She checked her phone more times than she intended to and was gratified by what she found each time. Her mother arrived at 9:30. Martha came alone, which was what Sarah had expected. She wore a well-chosen traditional outfit, a blue and gold buba and eero that she had clearly thought about carefully. She wore the kind of jewelry that suited the outfit without competing with it. She looked, by any honest accounting, elegant. She had the specific presence of a woman who was comfortable in her skin in a way that had nothing to do with the event's aesthetic. Sarah greeted her at the entrance. "Mama," she said, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," Martha said. She looked around the space. "This is a beautiful venue." "Thank you," Sarah said. "I worked very hard on it." Martha's eyes moved over the florals, the lighting, the arrangement of people. She was not an impractical woman and she could estimate costs. She looked at her daughter. "Come," Sarah said, "come and meet some people." She introduced Martha to several guests. Martha was warm and engaging in the way she had always been. She had been in business her whole life, and she knew how to be in a room. People responded to her well. An older woman at the party recognized her name from the Textile Association and spoke to her with genuine interest. Sarah moved away to manage other conversations. She was at the bar with a group of people. She was particularly trying to impress the three women whose lifestyle pages she had been observing for months, and whose presence at this party she considered a significant social win, when her phone rang. It was her mother's number. She looked at the phone, and then at the conversation she was in, and she let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. She declined it. She went back to the conversation. "My mother," she said lightly, "always calling." The women laughed. Martha, at the other end of the venue, put her phone in her bag. She found a chair near the east wall, near the window, where she could see both the entrance and the main party space. She sat down. She accepted a glass of water from one of the catering staff. She looked at the room. She looked at her daughter, visible in the group near the bar. Sarah's expression in that group, the way she was performing, the quality of the performance, was something Martha had been observing for years and had never been able to name precisely. It was not dishonest exactly. It was the performance of an identity that was not fully formed yet, and that required constant external validation to feel real. She looked at her watch and then remembered for a moment that the watch was not on her wrist. She had worn a different watch tonight, practical, functional. The real watch was elsewhere. She looked at the entrance. At 10:45, a black car arrived outside. "Stay right here, because what happens next is the part that nobody at that party ever forgot." Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub right now, because this is the moment everything changes and you do not want to miss a single second. The car pulled up outside the venue at exactly 10:45. It was a black Toyota Land Cruiser, not ostentatious, but the kind of well-maintained vehicle that communicated something specific about the person using it. The driver got out first. Then the passenger door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out. He was in his 40s, carrying a leather briefcase, with the specific demeanor of a professional who had been asked to perform a task and was performing it with complete precision. He walked to the venue entrance and spoke to the event coordinator near the door. She looked at him and then looked at something in her phone, an arrangement, apparently, that had been communicated to her earlier. She nodded. She went inside. Inside the party, the coordinator found Sarah. "There is a gentleman at the entrance," she said quietly. "He says he is here to deliver something for the anonymous buyer of an item from an auction platform." Sarah turned from the conversation she was in. "What?" she said. "An anonymous buyer," the coordinator said. "A vintage watch. He says the buyer prefers to collect in person." Something happened in Sarah's chest. Not yet alarm, not yet the full understanding, but something like the first sign of a temperature change in the air before weather arrives. She said, "Tell him I'll come." She excused herself from the group and went to the entrance. The lawyer, because that was what he was, she could see it in the briefcase and the suit and the specific way he spoke, greeted her with professional courtesy. "Miss Sarah Okonkwo," he said. "Yes," she said. "I represent the buyer of a vintage lady's gold watch, 1948, which was listed on the auction platform and sold 5 weeks ago. The buyer has elected to collect the item in person. They asked me to let you know they are here and to request, with your permission, that the collection happen with the current guests present." Sarah was very still. "With the guests present," she said. "The buyer's specific request," the lawyer said. "They were very particular about it." Sarah looked past him at the car. The car door was opening. She watched the door open. She watched a foot step out, a woman's foot in a good shoe, a foot that Sarah recognized immediately in the specific way that you recognize the physical reality of someone you have known your whole life. You do not need to see the whole person, you see the part and you know. Martha Adiz Okonkwo stepped out of the car. She was wearing her best clothes, the ones she kept for the important days, a deep burgundy traditional ensemble. The fabric was one from her own shop's early collection, something she had kept for 20 years because it was too good to sell and too beautiful not to wear for something that deserved it. She wore gold jewelry that was not excessive but was specifically chosen. Her hair was dressed. Her posture was the posture of a woman who had decided exactly who she was going to be this evening and had dressed accordingly. She walked to the entrance. She walked past Sarah. She walked into the party. The room did not stop all at once. It stopped in sections, the way crowds stop when something significant enters the space. First the people nearest the entrance, then the ripple outward as people followed the looks of the people beside them to understand what they were seeing. Martha walked to the center of the room. She did not look at the florals or the lighting or the photographer who had automatically raised his camera at the entrance of a woman who walked like that. She looked at the crowd until she found Adiz Ibe, Sarah's closest friend, who was standing near the bar. "Adiz," she said, warmly. She had known Adiz since Sarah was in university. "Ma," Adiz said. Her expression showed that she was absorbing something. "Please, can everyone gather a little closer," Martha said. Not a shout. She spoke in the voice of someone who has run a business association for 20 years and who understands that authority does not require volume. The crowd gathered. Sarah had come through the entrance behind her mother. She was standing at the edge of the crowd. Her expression, had the photographer caught it clearly in that moment, was not yet what it would become. It was still in the stage of a person who is processing what is happening and has not yet arrived at the full understanding. The lawyer stood near the entrance, briefcase in hand. Martha looked at the room. "Most of you don't know me," she said. "My name is Martha Okonkwo. I am Sarah's mother." A few people she had been introduced to earlier nodded. "I want to tell you a short story," she said. "And then I am going to collect something and go home, and I promise you that after that the party can continue." She looked at the lawyer. He opened his briefcase. He took out a box, a small wooden box, the kind used by the auction platform for high-value deliveries. He brought it to Martha. She held it. She did not open it yet. "In 1948, she said, "my grandfather saved money for 2 years. He saved without telling his wife because she would have told him to buy something practical. At the end of 2 years, he bought his wife, my grandmother, a gold watch." The room was very quiet. "My grandmother wore that watch for 34 years. She wore it to church and to funerals and to weddings. She wore it when she buried her husband. She wore it to every important moment of her family's life. When she died, she gave it to me. She held my hand and she said, 'Take care of it,' not because it is expensive, because of what it remembers." Sarah had moved to the edge of the inner crowd. She was visible, the photographer could see her face now. It had changed. "I wore that watch for 25 years, Martha said. Then I gave it to my daughter on her 25th birthday as the most important thing I could give her." She opened the box. Inside was the watch. The light in the room caught it the way it had always caught it, warm, specific, with the particular glow of gold that had been loved for a long time. "My daughter sold it," Martha said. The room was completely still. "She sold it," Martha said, "on an auction platform 5 weeks ago. She listed it online. She told me it was lost." Several people looked at Sarah. "She sold her grandmother's watch," Martha said, "to fund this party." The silence was the specific silence of a large room where everyone has understood something simultaneously, and nobody knows what the correct response is. "I'm not here to embarrass my daughter," Martha said. Then she stopped. She looked at the ceiling briefly. She corrected herself. "That is not entirely true. I am here because some things need to be witnessed, not to punish her, but because she chose to do this thing in public. She chose to use this party as the stage for the life she wants to show the world, and so the response needs to be in public too." She looked at Sarah. Sarah was looking at her mother. Her face had completed its transition from processing to understanding. What was there now was not defensible. "I bought back the watch," Martha said. "I paid triple the asking price, because this watch is not for selling. It is not an asset. It is not content for a page. It is my grandmother's 70 years of life. It is my grandfather's 2 years of saving. It is 34 years of Sunday mornings. It is my husband's memory and my mother's memory and my own 35 years of wearing it on the days that mattered." She looked at the watch in the box. "It is also the thing I chose to trust my daughter with," she said, "which was the real point of giving it to her, not the watch, the trust." She closed the box. She held it. She looked at the room, at the 83 people who had come to her daughter's party. "I want to say one more thing," she said, "and then I will go." She looked directly at the people who had been in the group near the bar, the 3 women whose pages Sarah followed, the people she had been trying to impress. "This party is beautiful," Martha said. "The flowers are beautiful, the food is excellent. My daughter has always had good taste." She paused. "But beauty built on something dishonest is not the same as beauty built on something real. I want you to know that the woman who invited you here tonight, who arranged all of this, she also carries something real. She comes from something real, and the thing she comes from is worth more than any of this." She looked at Sarah. "That is all I have to say," she said. She walked to the entrance. At the entrance, she paused and looked back once. Sarah was standing in the middle of the crowd. The crowd was very still. The DJ had stopped, the music had stopped, the catering staff had stopped moving. The photographer was not sure whether to take the photograph. Sarah and Martha looked at each other across the room. Then Martha walked out. The black car was still outside. The driver opened the door. She got in. The car drove away. And now we have to talk about what happened after. The party ended 20 minutes after Martha left. Not because anyone announced that it was over. No announcement was made. The momentum had been broken in the specific way that the momentum of a room breaks when something has entered it that is larger than the event itself. The DJ started again, tentatively. A few people began conversation, but the conversations were different now, quieter, more careful, shaped around something that had happened that nobody quite knew how to process while still in the room where it had happened. People began leaving in ones and twos, and then in groups. Adiz Ibe stayed. She stayed until the last guests had gone, and the caterer's team had begun clearing, and the photographer was packing his equipment. She stayed because Sarah had not moved from the spot near the bar where she had been standing when her mother left. Sarah had not spoken to anyone. She had stood there through the gradual emptying of the room and the folding away of the evening. When the room was almost empty, Adiz came to stand beside her. She did not say anything for a moment. "Sit down," Adiz said eventually. Sarah sat on one of the bar stools. She was still in the midnight blue dress. The dress looked different now, or it was the same and the room was different, or she was different. "How long have you known?" Adiz said. "Known what?" Sarah said. "That she knew," Adiz said. Sarah was quiet. "From the moment she walked through the door," Sarah said. "Not before." "Before I thought," she stopped. "I thought she was here as a guest. I thought the watch thing and the party were separate. I didn't," she stopped again. "I didn't think she would do that." "She paid triple the price," Adiz said, "to come here tonight." "I know," Sarah said. "To buy back her own grandmother's watch," Adiz said, "that her daughter sold." "Adiz," Sarah said. "I'm not lecturing you," Adiz said. "I'm saying it out loud because it needs to be said out loud. You were telling yourself it was fine. It wasn't fine." Sarah put her elbows on the bar and her face in her hands. "I know," she said. The room was very quiet now. The caterer's team were finishing. The florals were being taken down from the ceiling installations, the hanging amaranths coming down from where they had been strung an hour ago. In the morning, the roses would be done, and the fairy lights would be just lights, and the space would go back to being what it was before the event planner had done her work. "What do you owe?" Adiz said. Sarah told her the number. Adiz did not react to it. She was a finance professional and numbers were numbers. "And you have," she said. Sarah told her. Adiz did the calculation. 6 months, she said, if you stop everything non-essential. "Yes," Sarah said. "The credit card. Existing balance plus the party difference." "Okay," Adiz said. "That is a solvable problem, the money part." "I know the money part is solvable," Sarah said. "That's not." "I know it's not," Adiz said. "I know." She sat on the stool next to Sarah. They sat for a moment in the emptying room. "She said I come from something real," Sarah said. "You do," Adiz said. "I knew that," Sarah said. "I always knew that, but knowing it," and she stopped. "And living like it's true are different things," Adiz said. "Yes," Sarah said. Adiz was quiet. "The thing is," Sarah said, "I watched her my whole life, in the shop, at the fabric table in front of the house, all those years of the association. I watched her do all of it, and I kept thinking," she stopped and started again. "I kept thinking, she deserves more than this. She works so hard and she has this shop and this association and she is always calculating and managing and planning, and she deserves more than all of this hard work. She deserves the thing that the wealthy women who came to buy from her had, the ease of it." Adiz was listening. "And I decided," Sarah said, "that I was going to be that I was going to get to the other side and show her that it was possible, that someone in our family was going to have the ease." "But you thought the way to get there was to look like you were already there," Adiz said. "Yes," Sarah said. "And she worked for 40 years to actually get there," Adiz said. "And you saw all 40 years of work and thought the destination was the point." Sarah looked at her. "Yes," she said, "exactly that." Adiz was quiet for a moment. "You need to call her," she said. "I know," Sarah said. "Not tonight," Adiz said. "Tonight you sit with it, but in the morning." "Yes," Sarah said. The room was empty now. The event coordinator came to tell them that the venue needed to be cleared. They left. Outside, the Victoria Island night was doing what it always did, alive, moving, full of the specific energy of a city that never entirely stopped. The fairy lights were still on in the venue behind them. From outside, the space still looked beautiful. Sarah stood on the pavement. She called her mother. She had not intended to call tonight, but her hand was on the phone before the decision was fully made. It rang twice. Martha answered. "Mama," Sarah said. A short silence. Yes, Martha said. Sarah sat down on the pavement outside the venue. She did not care what it would do to the dress. She sat on the pavement of a Victoria Island street in her 30th birthday outfit, and she said, "I am so sorry." Martha was quiet. "I am so sorry," Sarah said again. "Not for tonight, for the watch, for the lie, for the whole thing." Martha said nothing. "I know what it meant," Sarah said. "I knew when I listed it. I told myself I didn't know, but I did know. I knew it was Grandma's, and I knew what it remembered, and I listed it anyway, and I lied to you, and I am so sorry." The line was quiet. "Mama," Sarah said. "I hear you," Martha said. Are you all right?" Sarah said. "I am," Martha said. "I am home. I made tea." Something about the specificity of this, "I made tea," broke something open in Sarah's chest. "Can I come?" Sarah said. "Can I come home? Not tonight, I know it's late. In the morning." A silence. "Yes," Martha said. "Come in the morning." They ended the call. Sarah sat on the pavement for a few more minutes. Adiz sat with her. "Okay," Adiz said eventually. "Get up, I'll drive you home." "Okay," Sarah said. She got up. She did not look back at the venue. She went home. She did not sleep. Not from guilt exactly, or not only from guilt, from something that was working itself out in her, a specific processing, the way that important understandings sometimes need to move through the body as well as the mind before they fully settle. She lay in her flat and she thought about her mother's face when she walked into the party, the way she had been dressed, the specific choice to dress for this occasion in a way that was about something that was not performed luxury, but was the result of a woman who had things that she kept for the days that deserved them. She thought about the watch in the box. She thought about Mama Adiz, a woman she had never met, who had died before Sarah was born. The woman who had been widowed at 32 and had run a textile business from her front room and had worn a watch for 34 years because her husband had saved for 2 years without telling her. She thought about what it meant to take something that remembered things and trade it for a night of photographs. She thought not equivalent. She thought not even close to equivalent. In the morning, she drove to Magodo. Martha opened the door. She was in her house clothes, a simple wrapper, no jewelry. The morning house clothes of a woman at home on a weekend morning. She looked the same and different, the same person, but without the specific weight that had been in her posture last night. She stepped back and let Sarah in. Sarah came in. She sat in the sitting room she had grown up in, with the furniture she knew and the photographs on the wall she knew, and the specific smell of her mother's house that was the smell of her whole life. Martha came and sat across from her. They looked at each other. "I don't know where to start," Sarah said. "Start anywhere," Martha said. Sarah started with the debt. She told her mother the full number, the venue, the caterer, the DJ, the photographer, the dress, the goodie bags, all of it. She did not soften it. Martha listened. "How long to clear it?" she said. 6 months if I stop everything except necessities," Sarah said. "Adiz helped me calculate." "Can you do 6 months of necessities only?" Martha said. "Yes," Sarah said, "I have to." Martha nodded. "Do it yourself," she said. "I will not give you money to clear this. Not because I don't have it, because you need to clear it yourself." "I know," Sarah said. "I wasn't going to ask." Martha looked at her. "Good," she said. A silence. "The watch," Sarah said. Martha looked at the wooden box on the side table. She had placed it there when she came home last night. I don't know what the right thing to say is," Sarah said. "I want to say I'll give you money for it, but you don't need money. I want to say it won't happen again, but that's insufficient. I want to." "Sarah," Martha said. Sarah stopped. "I am not asking you to pay for the watch," Martha said. "I am not asking you to do anything except understand something. Do you understand what I said last night? What I actually said? You said I come from something real, Sarah said. Yes, Martha said. And you do. And I think you have spent years running away from what it looks like: the shop, the calculation, the market, early mornings, the association, because it looked like work. Because it didn't look like the destination. It looked like the journey. Sarah was quiet. But the journey is the whole thing, Martha said. The destination is not a party. The destination is what you build over 40 years that is genuinely yours. I know that now, Sarah said. You always knew it, Martha said. The knowing was not the problem. What was the problem? Sarah said. Martha looked at her for a long moment. The problem, she said, is that you thought what I built was the journey and what those women in my shop had was the destination. But those women were not the destination. They were just further along a path. And some of them built their own path, and some of them were standing on somebody else's path, and the ones on somebody else's path, they cannot go anywhere the path didn't come with. Sarah sat with this. You built your path, Sarah said. Yes, Martha said. And I've been trying to stand on somebody else's, Sarah said. Yes, Martha said. They sat in the sitting room. Through the window, the Magodo estate morning. Sunday. A few cars. A woman walking a dog that was unsuitable for Lagos heat, but that she walked anyway every morning because she had chosen the dog and was committed to the choice. Can I ask you something? Sarah said. Yes, Martha said. The way you did it last night, coming in that car with the lawyer with the box, you planned all of it. Yes, Martha said. When did you plan it? Before you called to tell me the watch was lost, Martha said. I had already found the listing. Sarah was quiet. You knew before the second call, Sarah said. Yes, Martha said. And you still let me lie, Sarah said. I wanted to see what you would say, Martha said. I needed to hear it from you. And the triple price, Sarah said. You planned to pay triple. The watch was not negotiable, Martha said. Price was not the consideration. Sarah looked at the wooden box. Is it all right if I look at it? She said. Martha picked up the box. She brought it to the sofa and sat beside Sarah. She opened it. The watch. Sarah had looked at it many times. She had owned it for 3 years. She had photographed it twice. She had worn it twice. But she had never looked at it the way she looked at it now, sitting beside her mother in the Magodo sitting room on a Sunday morning. She looked at it and she thought about everything her mother had said. She thought about 1948 and a man saving without telling his wife. She thought about 34 years of Sunday mornings. She thought about Martha putting it on the morning after Victor's funeral. He looked like your grandfather, Martha said. She was looking at the watch too. Victor did. Not physically, he was taller, darker, but in the way of how he did things. Quietly, carefully, completely. Your grandfather saved for 2 years without saying anything and then gave your grandmother the watch on a Sunday morning. Victor spent 3 weeks finding my engagement ring and would not tell me where he had found it until 2 years after we were married. Sarah looked at her mother. You never told me that, she said. You never asked about him, Martha said, simply, not accusingly. Sarah felt this. Tell me more, she said. So Martha told her. She told Sarah about Victor in a way she had never told her before. Not the facts of his life that Sarah had grown up knowing, but the texture of him. The specific way he had been. The Thursday evenings when he would come home from the construction site and sit at the kitchen table, and they would go through the shop accounts together, not because she needed help with them, but because he wanted to know what was happening in her world. The way he drove, slowly, carefully, always with both hands on the wheel, because he said that driving was the one activity that should never be multitasked. The way he had stood in the compound and looked at the table she had set up in front of the gate and said, "When did you set this up?" The way his face had been when he read the notebook with the projections. The specific quality of a man who understood that his wife was building something, and whose response was not to direct or advise, but simply to fix the wobble in the table. Sarah listened. She had grown up without her father, and she had thought she knew what she had missed. She had not known. She had known the outline. The outline was not the person. The person arrived in Martha's telling, on a Sunday morning with the watch on the table between them. When Martha finished, Sarah said, "Do you miss him every day?" Martha thought about it honestly. "Not every day," she said. "Some days I get through without it, but many days, and on the days that matter, the ones that the watch is for, yes, every minute." They were quiet. "I will not sell it again," Sarah said. "I know," Martha said. "Not because you bought it back," Sarah said. "Because I understand what it is now. I knew before I told myself I knew, but I understand now." Martha closed the box. She held it for a moment. Then she set it on the table between them. "I am going to give you this back," she said. Sarah looked at her. "Mama." "I am going to give it back to you," Martha said. "Not now, not today, after the 6 months, after you have cleared every bill from that party with your own earnings. When that is done, you come here and I will give it back." Sarah looked at the box. "Why?" she said. "Because it is yours," Martha said. "I gave it to you and it is yours. What you did with it was wrong. The watch is still yours." "I don't deserve." "Deserve is not the point," Martha said. "The point is that giving it back and not giving it back are two different statements. Not giving it back says, you failed and the punishment is loss. Giving it back says, you failed and you understood why and you repaired what could be repaired, and now we are at the other side of it." Sarah looked at her mother. "I want to be at the other side of it," she said. "I know," Martha said. "That is why you came this morning." They sat for a while longer. Then Martha stood. "I am going to make breakfast," she said. "Come and help me." Sarah followed her to the kitchen. The 6 months were exactly that, 6 months of necessities only. She cleared the credit card in 3. She cleared the event costs in 5. The 6th month was buffer. It was not pleasant. It was the specific discipline of someone who has been reduced to what they actually need, and has discovered that what they actually need is much less than what they had been spending, and that the gap between the two was being maintained entirely for the benefit of people who did not know her well enough to care whether she maintained it. She also spent those 6 months differently. She went to her mother's on Sunday mornings. Not every Sunday. She had her own life and her own schedule, but most Sundays. She went and they had breakfast, and sometimes she helped at the shop, and sometimes they sat and talked, and sometimes she went to the association office with Martha and watched how the operation worked. She began to understand it. Not immediately. The first few weeks she was watching it as an outsider, seeing the mechanism without fully grasping the intelligence inside it. But Martha explained as she worked, the way she had always worked, not through formal lessons, but through the ongoing commentary of someone who was thinking out loud in the presence of another person who was paying attention. "The negotiation with this supplier," Martha said one afternoon. "I have been doing it for 20 years. He knows I know his costs, and I know he knows I know. So the negotiation is not about information, it's about relationship. He gives me a good price because I have been reliable for 20 years. He knows I will be reliable next year. Reliability is the price I am paying for the discount." Sarah wrote this down. She had started a notebook. Martha noticed the notebook. She said nothing about it, but she noticed it, and she began to include more explanation in her working commentary. The way a person adjusts their teaching when they understand that the student is taking notes. "You have been carrying all of this for so long," Sarah said one Sunday. "The association, the shop, the properties. You manage all of it yourself." "With staff," Martha said. "But the decisions," Sarah said. "Yes," Martha said, "the decisions are mine." "What would happen if you had support?" Sarah said. Someone who understood the business enough to handle some of the decisions, not to replace you, to extend you. Martha looked at her. "I have staff," she said. "Staff who execute," Sarah said, "not someone who thinks with you." Martha was quiet for a moment. "What are you suggesting?" she said. Sarah told her. She had been thinking about it for 3 months. She had been looking at the association structure, at the membership roster, at the income and expenditure, at the opportunities she could see from the outside of the business that Martha might have stopped seeing because she was too close to it. She had been making notes. She had been making connections between what she knew from her marketing work and what she was learning from the association's operation. She laid it out. Not everything. She did not want to overwhelm or presume, but the outline of it, the specific gap she could fill and how she would fill it and what it would produce. Martha listened to all of it. When Sarah was done, Martha was quiet for a long time. "You made a presentation," Martha said. "I made notes," Sarah said. "I used the notes." "You made a presentation," Martha said again, "with a notebook." Sarah looked at her. "Yes," she said. Martha looked at the notebook. "Your grandfather would have done that," she said. "Not the PowerPoint generation, he would have done it with a notebook." Sarah was quiet. "Your father would have come with a notebook," Martha said. "Tell me more about him," Sarah said. "Tell me everything you haven't told me yet." Martha looked at her daughter. Then she put the kettle on. And she told her everything. The 6 months ended on a Thursday. Sarah drove to Magodo. Martha opened the door. They sat in the sitting room. Martha brought the box from the shelf. She held it for a moment. "Everything cleared," she said. "Fully," Sarah said. "From your own earnings," Martha said, "not a question." "From my own earnings," Sarah said, "every naira." Martha opened the box. She lifted the watch. She held it for a moment with both hands, the way you hold something before you give it away. She thought about Mama Adi's hands on hers in 1973. She thought about, take care of it, not because it is expensive, because of what it remembers. She reached across and she took Sarah's hand. She turned it over. She placed the watch in it. She closed Sarah's fingers around it. Sarah looked at the watch in her palm. "I will take care of it," Sarah said. "I know," Martha said. They sat for a moment. Then Sarah said, "I want to come and work with you, properly, not to help, to learn and to contribute and to build something that is real. I want to stop performing arrival and actually get there." Martha looked at her for a long time. "You understand it will be hard," she said. "I come from you," Sarah said. "I know what hard work looks like." "You watched it for 20 years and then ran away from it," Martha said. "Yes," Sarah said, "I am not running anymore." Martha was quiet. "Monday," she said. "Come Monday morning, 7 o'clock, we start early." "I know," Sarah said. "You have always started early." Martha looked at her daughter. "You are going to be good at this," she said, "when you stop trying to be good at something else." Sarah looked at the watch. She looked at her mother. "What am I going to be good at," she said, "if not the other thing?" "At building something," Martha said, "genuinely with your name on it, the kind that lasts." Sarah was quiet. She thought about the shop table in front of the gate in Surulere in 1980, and the wobble on the left side, and a man who fixed it on the weekend, because his wife asked him to. She thought about the notebook with the projections in the apron pocket. She thought about 40 years of early mornings. She thought this is where it starts. Not the party, not the photographs, not the likes and the comments and the specific performance of arrival. Here, in a sitting room in Magodo with her mother across from her, and the watch in her palm, and the door open to an actual tomorrow. She was 30 years old. She was, for the first time, in exactly the right room. There is a word that Martha Adiz Okonkwo used throughout her life that she got from her grandmother. The word was remember. She used it specifically and carefully, not as a general word, not the way you say remember as a synonym for don't forget. She used it the way her grandmother had used it, as a word that described the function of certain objects, certain places, certain practices. The watch remembered. That was the word. The watch remembered 1948 and a man who saved for 2 years. It remembered 34 years of Sunday mornings. It remembered a woman widowed at 32 who kept going anyway. It remembered the morning after a funeral when a woman put it on and went back to work. Objects that remember are not the same as objects that cost money. An expensive thing that is only expensive is replaceable. An object that carries the specific weight of real events and real people and real choices. That object is irreplaceable in a way that has nothing to do with what anyone would pay for it on an auction platform. This is what Sarah did not understand when she listed the watch. She understood what it was worth. She did not understand what it remembered. This is the lesson of the story, but not the most important one. The most important lesson is what Martha did after. Martha Adiz Okonkwo was betrayed in the deepest possible way by the person she most loved and most trusted. She had given the most precious thing she owned to the person who was supposed to receive it, and that person had decided, quietly, privately, justifying it in small steps, that the thing was worth less than a party. Martha could have responded by withdrawing. She could have taken the watch and not given it back. She could have closed the door on her daughter and maintained the closing as the appropriate consequence. She could have chosen the dignity of refusal over the risk of reopened trust. She chose differently. She chose to go to the party. Not to shame Sarah, she said so herself, and if you listened carefully, she also corrected herself in the same breath. She chose to go because some things needed to be witnessed. Because Sarah had chosen a public stage for the version of herself she wanted the world to see, and the response to a public choice needed to be public. And then she chose to give the watch back. Not immediately. After 6 months of hard work. After every bill was cleared with Sarah's own earnings. After the distance between the action and its consequence had been crossed under the specific weight of real effort. She gave it back because giving it back was not the same as pretending it hadn't happened. It was the choice to be on the other side of it. That is a specific quality, the ability to hold someone fully accountable and also to remain open to what they become after the accountability, to not confuse punishment with consequence, to understand that the goal is not for the person to suffer, the goal is for them to understand. Martha understood this. Sarah learned it. And the watch is back on Sarah's wrist now. Not for parties, for the days that deserve it. If you have a mother who built something for you, who woke early and calculated carefully and sacrificed things you didn't even know she sacrificed, sit with her this week. Not to apologize for anything necessarily, just to sit with her, to ask her about what she remembers. Because she is not just a person, she is a history. And histories, when they are given to you, are not for selling. They are for carrying. This has been Tribal Tales Hub. If this story moved something in you, if any part of it landed like this video, it takes 1 second and it means everything. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub. We are here every week with a story that stays with you. Hit that bell. Be there when the next one arrives. Comment below. Tell us about something that remembered, an object, a place, a practice, something that carried the weight of real people and real choices. Tell us. We read everything. Share this video. Send it to someone who needs to understand the difference between what something costs and what it remembers. Send it to a mother. Send it to a daughter. Send it to anyone who has ever been given something precious and not fully understood what it carried. This is Tribal Tales Hub. We will see you in the next story.